Beat the colds and flu in this way. Solve the problem of colds. Detailed version. Now you will be an Iron Man against colds. What to do? 1. If possible, make it a habit to do regular gargle after going out with diluted povidone iodine. 2. If your nose hurts slightly between the day you go out and the next week or so, immediately disinfect your nose with an antiseptic gargle solution. For example, diluted povidone iodine, etc. In addition to 1, there are also 2 and 3 disinfection methods. 1. Nasal disinfection method using povidone iodine and tissue paper balls described later. 2. Bactericidal nasal spray method commercially available products. 3. Bactericidal nasal irrigation nasal rinse method commercially available products. When it is over, at the same time, ordinary gargle with bactericidal product should carefully apply to your pharynx. 3. If the symptoms do not subside, repeat the procedure. For finally, if it still does not subside, seek medical attention. Then you'll be immune. That's all it takes to become an Iron Man against colds. Let's take a look at the video below.
Nasal disinfection method against colds and flu. A Hirano medical channel in Kyoto, Japan. This method is inexpensive. It's easy for individuals. I also think it can be used especially effectively in developing countries.
Hi all. How are you? As an author, I would like to introduce myself a little. I am a physician who has worked as a public health physician for about 14 years. There was one thing that bothered me in my life. Before that, I often caught a cold and suffered, but one day, after going out, the back of my nose hurts. I suddenly wonder if I can somehow disinfect the back of my nose. So I dilute the iodine in a teacup with water and next I tore tissue papers up, rolled it up, soaked it in iodine liquid appropriately. I stuffed it into the nostril that hurt. It's the beginning. At that time, the pain in the nose disappears immediately, and after that, I developed no colds. Later, I also began to add gargle with iodine. Since then, I have repeated this method and passed without catching a cold for a long time, and it has been more than 10 years. Also, avian influenza is frequently reported on TV and other media, but I would like to introduce it this time. I believe that this method can also be applied in the event of an outbreak of a new type of influenza, so please see page 16. For these reasons, we thought we would share this method with you.
Take a look at below to make it easier to understand. Colds and flu. We all suffer from colds and flu every year. There is a way you may be able to prevent colds and flu. We will inform you. First, let's learn about inactivated vaccines. What is an inactivated vaccine? An inactivated vaccine is an injection into the human body that kills bacteria and viruses and makes them less virulent. This is highly safe, but it is generally less effective than the live vaccine described below, so it may be necessary to inject it many times. Second, let's learn about live vaccines. What is a live vaccine? Live vaccines are administered to the human body by damaging live bacteria and viruses to the point where they do not cause illness. In a sense, this carries the risk of developing the disease, but immunity is sufficiently fostered, and the effect is indeed great. Anatomy of the nose. Let's understand basic anatomy. People breathe through nose or mouth. Take a look at the diagram below to understand the importance of nasal breathing. What happens if you get a cold? If the pathogen multiplies at the attachment site of the nasal cavity, or nasopharynx, or oropharynx, or hypopharynx, and further descends and allows it to spread to the trachea, bronchi, lungs, you may have chance to get immunity. But it will develop in earnest, and there will be severe symptoms, and in some cases, it may be life-threatening. What if you breathe through your mouth? With mouth breathing, by regular gargle immediately after returning home, small number of pathogens attached to the oropharynx or hypopharynx are killed promptly. In this case, immunity against the pathogen is not maintained. You don't have enough time to earn it. If you don't do gargle when you get home, you allow the onset of the disease. It is called throat hurts. At this point, the symptoms will be alleviated by gargle, but pathogens have already invaded the trachea, bronchi, and lungs. In many cases, it is not possible to prevent full-fledged illness. In other words, in the case of mouth breathing, it is often not possible to acquire enough immunity without developing disease.
Principle of our method. Fortunately, when you're out and about, you breathe primarily through your nose. In normal nasal breathing, if the pathogen adheres to the nasal cavity or nasopharynx, and then if you do a regular gargle immediately after returning home as generally done, the oropharynx or hypopharynx can be disinfected due to gravity, but the nasal cavity and nasopharynx are often not properly disinfected. After that, if the proliferation of pathogen in the nasal cavity or nasopharynx is left untreated, it will eventually descend and it will progress to full-fledged onset of the disease. Therefore, if you can wait until you get slight symptoms, and give the human body's immune system enough time to recognize the pathogen and get immunity, and after that disinfect the nasal cavity and nasopharynx with the nasal disinfection method and disinfect the oropharynx and hypopharynx with ordinary gargle at the same time, so that the pathogen cannot go down and progress. You can earn it. This is a method of using the pathogen itself as a substitute for a live vaccine. The ultimate live vaccine, it can be said.
Chemicals of our specific nasal disinfection method. Therefore, we would like to explain the nasal disinfection method that we have succeeded in so far. We thought about stuffing tissue paper balls soaked in disinfectant into the nasal passages and the back of the nose. We made a tissue paper ball about 1 cm in size. Since the antiseptic solution is used intranasally, it must be hypoallergenic and have a disinfecting effect. Given these, we used a moderately diluted povidone iodine solution betadine for gargle, albeit a bit irritating. Some tissue paper ball soaked in disinfectant solution is stuffed into the nostrils on the symptomatic side. It takes about 4 to 5 pieces for filling up to the entrance of the nostrils. We don't care if the disinfectant liquid drips or falls. Catch it with a towel.
If you are iodine sensitive, there are a lot of other mouthwashes which have bactericidal effects, so let's try using them. Explanation of specific nasal disinfection method. Wait for about 5 minutes while enduring the discomfort of the nose in the packed state. After that, put the towel against your nose and press strongly on the nostrils on the healthy side with your fingers. If you blow your nose as much as you can gush out all tissue balls from the nostril of the one that hurts. It all comes out on the towel. The tissue paper balls have never come out of the nasopharynx into the oropharynx. We've never experienced it. At this stage, the enemy is still small number of pathogens, so it is easy to defeat. After that, ordinary gargle should be done on oropharynx and hypopharynx, and let's do it persistently. As a result, If in the unlikely event that the oropharynx or hypopharynx was invaded by some advance party of pathogens, even if so, you can get rid of it. Explanation of the specific nasal disinfection method. On the day you go out. In general, you need to be careful from that night until about a week. Usually, around this time, the back of the nose is itchy, there is mild pain, etc. Mild local peculiar symptoms appear. This is because the pathogen attached to the nasal cavity nasopharynx during the day multiplies exponentially after infection, and the disease develops mildly from the evening of the day to about a week, and the human immune system is fully aware of the pathogen at this stage. Wait until you get a little sick. That's what matters. You don't know when you inhaled the pathogen, so wait until mild symptoms appear. After that, you will use nasal disinfection method to get rid of nasal pathogens, and at the same time, if you gargle in the usual way, you can prevent the downward progression of the disease, and can prevent full-fledged illness in the bronchi and lungs, and furthermore, can acquire sufficient immunity. If left untreated at this point, the disease will develop in earnest.
Comparison of measures and responses flowchart. Please read it.
Thinking about how to respond in the event of a pandemic. Even if a new pathogen appears in the world, such as a pandemic, it is not possible for residents to acquire immunity in this way, with putting on a mask and avoiding the 3 Cs. As a response in the event of a pandemic that takes into account the nasal disinfection method mentioned this time, if the situation does not improve even after taking the following measures, you will consider medical measures. 1. Always stock up on an appropriate amount of bactericidal gargle medicine in each household. When pandemic, regular gargle after going out is to prevent the onset of illness with mainly mouth breathing. 2. During the pandemic, if mild nasal symptoms appear, residents should immediately disinfect their noses with the nasal disinfection method, and at the same time, they should also disinfect their pharynx with bactericidal gargle. 3. If symptoms recur, educate them to repeat the same measures. Because at the time of the first infection, a large amount of virus after disinfection remains, the measures will be continuous, and if a small amount remains, or if the acquired immunity at the first time was weak and there is a next reinfection, the symptoms will occur after a pause. So in either case, the same measures should be repeated. 4. It should also be explained that even if you take these measures, when you have no symptoms at all, you may not immune. 5. The people who are dressed in protective clothing can help residents who show slight symptoms and who have no power to disinfect their noses and pharynx. With the nasal disinfection method, you can also spray them on the nose and with ordinary bactericidal gargle. The important thing is whether we can prevent pathogens to enter from nasal cavity, nasopharynx, oropharynx, and hypopharynx to trachea, bronchi, and lungs, or not. If the aforementioned measures are taken, the person will be immune to the pathogen and will not develop the disease. When that happens, they can turn person to deal with the nasal disinfection method and to helps the gargle. Since they are immune, they may not need a mask. Pediatricians examine many patients with infectious diseases every day. Will he not get a cold? Many pediatricians say that when they have just graduated and were resident, they had a lot of colds. But as the years passed, they rarely get a cold at clinics. Because the onset of disease and recovery from it were repeated many times, they acquired immunity to most pathogens. Slide 9. Our method is to artificially create this situation without the onset of illness. Doubts about the nasal disinfection method. We think you may have questions about this method. 1. The tissue bulb remains permanently in the nose and cannot be removed. Is there a fear? It has constantly come out before. As a last resort, if you have an otolaryngologist, he will take it. Don't worry, feel at ease. 2. What if the pain persists? You can repeat the same technique until it no longer hurts. 3. The feeling of antsy in the back of nose may be due to simply a big booger. Is that okay? Well, it's okay, even if it's a trouble, it's better than suffering from a cold. 4. Is it not effective to gargle regularly after going out? We can't know when we inhaled a virus or other pathogen. Gargling after going out can disinfect the nasal cavity and nasopharynx to some extent. In addition, it is meaningful that disinfection of the oropharynx and hypopharynx is considered to be very effective. In this reason, you should gargle regularly right after you get home. But in these cases, the onset of the disease may be prevented, but enough immunity may not be obtained. Moreover, if you notice a slight symptom in your nose, anytime you should immediately disinfect your nose and also should gargle in normal way. In the latter case, there is a high possibility sufficient immunity can be obtained.
Other nasal spray method, nasal irrigation method. 1. Nasal spray method. Pour disinfectant mouthwash in a spray container. Spray from the entrance of the nostril on the symptomatic side to the back of the nose and disinfect the nose. This method is a little more acceptable mentally than the method of stuffing tissue bulbs. For a moment, I was in tears, and it was over. But as with injections, it may be better to have someone else do it. It is better to spray several times than once. 2. Nasal irrigation method. There are also people out there who advocate nasal rinsing, nasal washing. In general, a cleaning solution such as saline is poured into the nasal cavity. It is a self-care method that washes away dirt and foreign objects in the back of the nose. This used to take sticky runny nose that cannot be removed by blowing your nose, allergens, pollen, house dust, etc. Also, it can effectively remove bacteria, viruses, etc. In case of nasal disinfection method, it will also need for sterilization characteristics. We are currently researching nasal spray method and nasal irrigation method. For the time being, we have succeeded in the former. In addition, we will report if we can obtain some knowledge. To the Iron Man against cold. By repeating such a nasal disinfection method, it does not develop disease, and eventually prevents almost pathogens. On the other hand, strong immunity is acquired and accumulated in the human body. You will become a strong body that hardly catches a cold. Yes, you are. Iron Man against cold it has become. Let's all get rid of the cold. A Hirano Medical Channel in Kyoto, Japan.
Thank you very much for watching to the end. It is the end. We would like to express our sincere gratitude for your good health and success.